And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. Appreciate you guys joining us. It is a Wednesday afternoon, almost evening anyway, for most of you guys out there. Appreciate you guys for joining us. But this is the first installment of our weekly show that we're going to have for you guys, considering the NFL, where the playoffs picture is, and it's not too early to start discussing those types of things. You look at teams like the Minnesota Vikings are 0-3. They're a far cry from the playoffs right now. They really need to get in gear if they're going to have any chance of even sniffing the wild card picture. But it is we're heading into week 4 right now, so let's get into some of the headlines. We'll start in the AFC anyway. The Miami Dolphins are the story of the AFC, in my opinion. Just the sheer offensive production that they've been able to put out all 3 weeks so far. They've faced one good defense in the New England Patriots. Not elite, but it is one of the best coached defenses in the entire NFL. They were limited to under 30 points in that game. Outside of that, it's basically been a fireworks show nonstop there in Miami. We'll see if they can continue that spectacle in week 4. But you look at where Miami is heading and what trajectory they seem to be headed down. This is going to be one of the most prolific offenses in NFL history. By the end of the season, we could be considering Tyreek Hill as an MVP candidate. We'll see if Tua Tagovailoa is able to stay healthy, but they are the story in the AFC right now. The Buffalo Bills got off to a terrible start on the road against the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers went down after 4 snaps with the Jets, and they were still unable to win that game. And that's their one blemish on their record. They haven't really faced anybody as of yet, but we'll see how they're tested as they get into weeks 7, 8, and 9. But right now, Buffalo 2-1. Second place in that division. There's nobody really in that division now that Aaron Rodgers is out for the entirety of the regular season at the very least. You look at the rest of this division, it's going to be between Miami and Buffalo for the tops in this division. And I think Miami's going to run away and hide with this division. Probably going to be looking at like a 13-4 record from Miami, maybe even better than that. Buffalo, I think, best case scenario gets to that mark. So I'm going to pencil them in as a wild card contender, at least the way things stand right now. Looking at the New England Patriots, they got a tough test against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas after they, let's just say they laid an egg, to put it most politely anyway. But Bill Belichick, still one of the best defensive minds in the entire game, posted a video a couple weeks ago about Mac Jones and how he's more of a stepping stone, I should say, to the next great quarterback for the New England Patriots. We kind of knew everybody was going to be a step down, no matter who they went with after Tom Brady. But Mac Jones, he's had a decent career so far, but they haven't really seen any type of juice out of him. He's a very good high-end backup, maybe a low-end starter, but he's nowhere near the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL. And when you have a great defensive mind like Bill Belichick, just being a game manager can get you to an 8-8, 8-9 record, 9-8 record. But you look at Bill Belichick, he's used to getting into the playoffs. He wants a quarterback who's able to not turn over the ball, but still be able to come through in the fourth quarter and gut out some of those tough performances. They've held a couple of the league's top offenses down so far this year, and were unable to win those games. They're 1-2 right now. They held Eagles underneath 30 points, same thing with Miami, but they just couldn't get the W in those games, even with the defense holding some of the league's best offenses to under 30. They just didn't have enough firepower offensively to be able to get it done, and that's with Mac Jones as your quarterback. Now, the Jets have all kinds of headlines about them, about what they should do at their quarterback position. Zach Wilson, of course, is the starter right now. They just signed Trevor Siemian, made it official today to their practice squad. He has some experience in that New York system. We'll see if they decide to turn to Trevor Siemian at some point in lieu of Zach Wilson. But it's clear this head coach, this coaching staff just does not trust Zach Wilson. I've heard some of the hot take artists out there over the last week or so say if you're not going to use Zach Wilson, if you're not going to allow him to throw the ball, whether it's a pick or not, if you're not going to let him at least run the offense, then why do you even have him out there? And I get that, but you still have to be able to win the games. And they have a very good defense, and they want to make sure that they're not turning over the ball. I just talked about how Mac Jones was kind of a game manager type quarterback for the New England Patriots. That's the kind of quarterback I think would work really well right now in the New York Jets, just to be able to get them into the wild card picture. And if by that time Aaron Rodgers is able to come back and be healthy, they could upset some folks in that wild card round. But right now, it's kind of a long shot, to say the least, to see the New York Jets getting into the wild card round. But if they're able to make a trade, there's some rumors out there about Kirk Cousins, other quarterbacks that could be moved. You know, if they make that type of a move, of course, I think they get to that 8-9, 9-8 record and are contending for that wild card spot. But the way the roster is currently constructed with the quarterback position, I just don't see it in the cards. The AFC North has kind of been, well, muddy, we'll put it that way. Pittsburgh Steelers, I guess you consider them the leader in this division, tied with the Ravens and the Browns. Browns probably have one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the entire game. With Nick Chubb going down due to injury, though, it's just a matter of time before they start to lose a little bit of ground in the division. Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, of course, missed most of training camp anyway, but he's looking like the old Joe Burrow a little bit more each week. Was absolutely terrible against that Browns defense in week 1. The Ravens, I still think the Ravens need to go out there and make an addition at that running back spot to really push this roster over the top. I made the argument that they should go after Jonathan Taylor. If they don't do that, and once again go to the waiver wire, they could bring in a guy like Myles Gaskin, who they just signed to their practice squad. They could go out there and get Leonard Fournette. But as it stands right now, I just don't think the running back room is good enough for the Baltimore Ravens to get the job done. But as far as this division, it could go pretty much any way at this point, but I'm expecting the Browns to fall off the cliff here. But Kevin Stefanski is going to have to, muster the troops, get the best out of them, and make a run to at least the playoffs if he wants to keep his job. Otherwise, we're looking at a new head coach in Cleveland next season. AFC South, the Colts quietly are 2-1 right now. They have a rookie quarterback, and then they had a backup quarterback start in a couple of games so far this year. Texans are 1-2. Meanwhile, the Jaguars, probably the most disappointing team, had a nice win in week 1, but had the Kansas City Chiefs at home and just could not muster any first downs. Trevor Lawrence has been a blight on that team the last 2 weeks. A year that I thought he was really going to step forward and get into that MVP discussion, he's really fallen flat on his face. Calvin Ridley, week 1 was fantastic. Week 2 and 3, a little bit of a no-show. Meanwhile, Christian Kirk, one of the top pieces offensively for them last year, has had 1 good game so far out of 3. Just a very inconsistent stop-and-start offense that's just not converting in the red zone. And until they fix those problems, you're still probably looking at a 500 team. Once they do, watch out. This team still has a lot of potential. I believe that this team can get a little further than what they did last year, but they're going to have to correct the course of their season right now. 1-2 to start the year, and they haven't even exactly played a really high-end competition. You look at the Texans; they lost to last week. The Chiefs were still trying to get their team back together. It's just not working out so far for the Jaguars, but they could get it turned around. Now, the Tennessee Titans, I was going to make a video on this, but I wasn't sure how many views it was going to get because it is Tennessee. But Tennessee needs to make a change at quarterback. Ryan Tannehill needs to take a seat on the bench. He's turning over the football in one game, not moving the ball in another, and just not providing any type of spark offensively to this team. Now, they've got a couple of quarterbacks that they could turn to. Malik Willis, they got Will Levis as well. I would probably turn to Will Levis just because he's the one that you really invested the higher-end draft pick last year, and I think he has the greater potential out of the quarterbacks that are on the bench. But I think he would learn quite a bit from actually being in the game rather than holding the clipboard on the side. And you look at how listless the team looks whenever they were playing last week and the week before, it's just not a team that you look at and say, hey, that's a team that can win the AFC South. They have a decent enough defense. Mike Vrabel, one of the best coaches in the entire NFL, makes the most out of whatever he's given. The trade of A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles absolutely set this franchise back. Now they got another top-end wide receiver there in DeAndre Hopkins, but they aren't getting him the ball and are not getting him the ball in the right situations as well. And right now they sit 1-2. So that's kind of how the AFC South sits. AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs, of course, once again on top. What a surprise, even after losing the opener at home on banner-raising night. The Chiefs are 2-1. Meanwhile, the Raiders, Chargers, and Broncos are all varying levels of disappointments. As far as the Chiefs go, we'll start with the positives. Travis Kelce is back after hyperextending his knee before the season. Missed 1 game, looked rusty in week 2, but still scored a touchdown. And now it looks like he's good to go pretty much the rest of the season. We'll see Travis Kelce return to some of that elite tight end production, I believe, starting this week. Now, as far as the defensive side of the ball, they got Chris Jones back, signed him to a 1-year deal to at least satisfy him for 1 season. They have significant salary cap questions going into next season. This could be the last year of peak Patrick Mahomes that we get with the highest level team around him. next season is when you could really see this team start to lose some key pieces of the organization while they try to retool. We've seen this from other high-level teams in various levels of their contending window, where they have to step back 1 or 2 years to get their books right. Then they go out in free agency or step out there and re-sign their players a little bit better. But right now, you're looking at probably the best team Patrick Mahomes is going to have over the next 2 or 3 years. So we'll see if Patrick Mahomes can cash in for yet another Super Bowl victory. Now, the rest of the division, as I mentioned, it's varying levels of disappointment in the AFC West. The Raiders, nobody really expected them to, win the division, but hopes were high in Vegas for Jimmy Garoppolo coming in. Of course, he is now out with concussion symptoms. This team has a really high-end wide receiver in Davante Adams. A lot of trade rumors in the offseason about him possibly going to the Jets or whoever might not end up with OBJ or DeAndre Hopkins. Now you're starting to see those headlines start to percolate once again. The 49ers are listed as one of the favorites for him. Dallas Cowboys, pretty much any team that needs a high-end piece for a wide receiver could be interested in Davante Adams. Kansas City Chiefs, as I mentioned, would be a great fit for him. However, they don't have the money to be able to get it done. If they bring in somebody like that, they're going to need him on an expiring deal. So I floated the idea in one of my lives last week that they could make a 3-team trade. Davante Adams could go to Dallas, be the number 2 there, or the 1A, 1B with CeeDee Lamb. Send Brandon Cooks to the Kansas City Chiefs since he is on an expiring deal. That would upgrade the Chiefs' offense, give him a high-end, how do I put this? A more sure-handed wide receiver than anything they have on their roster at the moment. Better than anything else at the roster at the wide receiver position that they have at the moment. And would be able to satisfy maybe some draft pick capital going, however you see fit. But that would be an interesting idea as far as moving on from Davante Adams. Chandler Jones, of course, continues to bring headlines off the field for the Raiders. That contract just has not looked good since the moment they signed him from Arizona. And they're going to be a team that's going to be gunning for one of those top-end quarterbacks in the draft, like Caleb Williams. So keep your eyes peeled on how quickly they try to pull the plug on the season. The LA Chargers were 0-2 going into Minnesota, who was also 0-2 last week. And they tried, as they might, to give that game away. Brendan Staley absolutely committed several egregious mistakes as a head coach that I believe he should have been fired for immediately on the tarmac before he even boarded the plane. No matter the result of the game, they still won against Minnesota, I suppose, but it's still not good enough to turn over the football with less than 3 minutes left in the game inside of your own 30-yard line, giving Minnesota one of the highest caliber offenses in the NFL, a short field to work with, and a touchdown would have beaten them. So something to consider as far as the LA Chargers. Just how long do they ride Brendan Staley here as head coach? We're seeing him continually mismanage how he's managing either the clock, time of possession issues, how he's deciding to either not necessarily play call, because that's Kellen Moore, but how he's deciding to operate his team, whether it's sending in a prevent defense or asking his defensive coordinator, hey, let's just not giving up anything over the top, or if he's just running the ball into the ground when not getting first downs in the second half, when his offense is getting all kinds of yardage in the first half. He's just very inconsistent as a head coach, I guess, is my biggest point. And it's just not working out. A lot of egregious mistakes, not just from that game, but we've seen it in all 3 weeks now for the LA Chargers head coach. They lost at home in a tough one against Miami, I understand, but that's another game they should have had in the bag, and they just couldn't get the job done. 1-2, honestly, is a little bit of a gift for how their season has gone so far. But I'm expecting Brandon Staley to be out of there by the end of the season. I'm curious to see if they would fire him in the season. Maybe that's the reason why they don't want to rock the boat, put Kellen Moore in there as the interim head coach, I suppose. A guy who's never done it before, that would be another option. But just a lot of bad headlines coming out of the Chargers. The Denver Broncos, absolute dumpster fire of an organization right now at the quarterback position. Just the worst mistake that they could make, making that deal for Russell Wilson, who absolutely looks washed right now. He's not completing simple passes. He's not seeing wide open receivers. We thought Sean Payton would go in there, and it would take some time. We thought that would be the case, but he doesn't even look like he's worked with him at all. I mean, they don't seem to see eye to eye on the field. They're not getting easy first downs when their defense is literally giving it to them. And I think it's just Russell Wilson right now, just putting way too much pressure on him, focusing on the Russell Wilson ink, if you will, and then the competitiveness between the head coach and player. So we'll see how much longer they decide to stick with Russell Wilson. They invested so much money in him, yet they also invested a lot of money in their backup quarterback in Stidham. $10 million for a backup is not exactly cheap money. So if they decide to make the move and move on from Russell Wilson, they're sinking a ton of money, and Stidham would have to be the starter. But that AFC West clearly is the Kansas City Chiefs to lose. I'm expecting them to kind of coast the rest of the season. Sure, the Chargers could make a nice run, but I'm not expecting it, not with Brendan Staley as their head coach. And the Chiefs are going to have a nice ride all the way through the regular season as long as Patrick Mahomes is able to stay healthy. On the NFC side, the Philadelphia Eagles look every bit the most dangerous team in the NFL right now. They haven't even clicked on all cylinders yet, and still they're 3-0, 84 points for, 59 against. Their defense is still very good, even with all the departures they had last year. It's going to take some time for them to really gel like they did last year. I don't think they're going to have nearly the sacks that they did last year, but the Eagles still look like a very formidable team out there in the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys lost in a stunner on the road to Arizona, laid an egg. I think this was a pure indictment against Dak Prescott, and I think the Dallas Cowboys front office needs to start considering their options after this season with what they want to do with Dak Prescott, Trey Lance, or go after one of the quarterbacks in the draft. They're going to have some decisions to make. I think the Cowboys are still one of the best teams in the NFL despite their quarterback, or should I say in spite of their quarterback. They have some nice pieces on the outside. I think they could use another running back who can run between the tackles. Rico Dowdle's done a nice job so far this season, but Tony Pollard just cannot get that hard-earned yard at all. He's more of a Ferrari and needs wide open space to be able to be effective. He gets you those 30-yard runs every now and again, but every now and again when you need that 3rd and 1, that 4th and 1, that 3rd and goal from the 1 or 2 yard line, he's not the guy to be able to hand the ball off to. And so I think they need to at least try different strategies rather than consistently just trying to hammer Tony Pollard in there and having it fail time and time again. But that's part of the area part of the reason why you miss a guy like Ezekiel Elliott when you have a guy like Tony Pollard not converting in those situations. The Washington Commanders have played really well so far better than what I thought they would. Sam Howell at least looks like he's commanding the offense. Eric Bieniemy trying to show that he can handle a quarterback besides Patrick Mahomes and try to finally get one of those head coaching jobs. Commanders, I do think, will fall off in the second half of the season, but they've had a very nice start. Ownership group has changed. The organization as a whole just has a lot more juice, a lot more life. We'll see what their future looks like if they decide to go with Sam Howell after the season, or if they decide, hey, we'll just go with Sam Howell this year and try to trade up in the draft for a quarterback this offseason. So keep your eyes peeled on what the Commanders try to do around the trade deadline with some of their pieces that they could move. The New York Giants absolutely got blitzed on Sunday Night Football in Week 1. Big comeback in Week 2. And they're just kind of an up and down team right now for the New York Giants. They got completely smoked by the San Francisco 49ers, as a lot of teams are going to be this year. But the Giants, I just don't think they have the weaponry to be able to get anything done offensively. Darren Waller is a good player, but they don't really have anybody to take pressure off of him. Saquon Barkley's already missed some time due to injury this year. And Daniel Jones, they gave him that big contract. I think they're already starting to regret giving him that deal. They don't really have the offensive line to protect him, which is the biggest thing for him. If he's able to have time, he's a lot more effective as a quarterback. Doesn't turn over the ball, isn't taking big sacks, those types of things. When he's not being protected, that's when the issues come. Turnovers, sacks, those types of issues. Being behind the chains, not converting first downs. And I just don't think Daniel Jones has enough special gifts to be able to overcome the issues of his own team around him. Think of him as kind of a different version of Dak Prescott, where Dak Prescott still needs to have everything right around him to be able to perform at his best, and even then, you still have questions about his accuracy. Daniel Jones still needs to have a very good offensive line, and he can elevate a few of the pieces there, but it's never going to be enough to get them, where they want to go. You look at the NFC North. Wow. Green Bay Packers once again on top without Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love, of course, is taken over there as their quarterback, and he's looked good through the first 3 weeks. Not saying he looks like Aaron Rodgers, but I'm just saying so far so good for the Green Bay Packers. They have a good running back, of course, Aaron Jones. He's been out the last 2 weeks. If they get him back this week, expect this team to kind of coast a little bit here. This division is very winnable this year. The Lions are right there as well. Vikings, I think, are going to take a big step back this year. I think they should absolutely consider tanking, moving on from Kirk Cousins, and try to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. Mention that for a lot of teams here at the bottom of these divisions. They need to make these decisions quickly because if they win 2 or 3 games here early in the season and then try to change course, they're going to miss out on getting a guy like Caleb Williams at the top of the draft. So right now, Vikings are 0-3, Bears are 0-3. They need to decide this week, at the very latest next week, if they're going to tank to have a legitimate shot to be able to get those guys. As for the Chicago Bears, that organization just looks terrible right now. They've failed drafting a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. They haven't supported either quarterback with the front office behind him or the head coach behind him. And so we'll see what they decide to do after the season. I think the best course of action for Chicago would be to clean house both in the front office and the head coach and just move on from there. Now, Eberflus is one of the best defensive minds out there. I think he'd latch on somewhere as a great defensive coordinator next year, and I think he has a future as a head coach. But he was given Justin Fields. He didn't select Justin Fields, so this coaching staff doesn't necessarily view him as their guy, if you will. And now with an 0-3 start, it's hard to see them changing that opinion. Justin Fields looked like he's regressed the last few weeks as well. He's not very uncomfortable in the pocket. He's not running like he used to as well. He just looks very uncertain of what to do in that Chicago Bears offense. And this team needs to decide right now if Justin Fields is the answer, then give him that support. If not, then it's time to go ahead and make a move. And we'll see just how things go for the Chicago Bears the rest of the way. In the NFC South, the Falcons have had a nice surprising start to the season, as have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. All 3 teams have played well so far, but I think all 3 teams are not exactly playoff contenders. One of them is going to be in the playoffs, obviously. I'm expecting probably the New Orleans Saints. They have the best defense and the most competent quarterback leading their team. Falcons have a great running game, and I think are going to be around 800 or around 500 again. But they don't really have a quarterback that excites me. Their receiving core has a lot of question marks for me. Their running back room, though, is elite. They have not 1, not 2, but 3 running backs who could be starters on other teams. And I think the Falcons are going to be right there all the way to the end of the season. If they somehow sneak into the wild card, they're going to get blitzed in the first round of the wild card in the NFC playoffs. But they've had a nice start to their season. For the New Orleans Saints, like I said, they've got a decent quarterback there. Derek Carr is out right now. Concussion, I believe, was his issue. But Jameis Winston's expected to start this week. Alvin Kamara is back from his suspension, and this defense is still very good. Now, they still have some salary cap concerns going forward after this season, but this year they should still be right there at the tops in this division. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers got off to a great start with Baker Mayfield as their starter. They got a couple of top-end receivers that I'm considering that it's worth at least considering that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could sell both of those wide receivers at the deadline. So keep your eyes peeled for where Mike Evans could go. He has not discussed a contract extension with the team since the start of the year, and he's in the final year of his deal. Now, of course, they could franchise him, etc., but I think there's going to be a pretty price for Mike Evans at the trade deadline, and I think they'll be able to get whatever they decide they want, whether it's a low-end first-round pick, a couple of extra draft picks as well, in addition to a second-round pick, but they're going to get a nice return for Mike Evans. Carolina, Bryce Young's had some nice moments so far this year. Andy Dalton started last week, but Bryce Young looks like a quarterback of the future for them. Looks like he's at least progressing each week that he's in there. He's not making the big mistake. They're being very careful with how they use him so far this rookie season, but it's clear he has no weapons on the outside to throw to. Adam Thielen, as much as I appreciate him as a former Minnesota Viking, since I'm a little bit of a Vikings fan as well, he just looks like his best days are far behind him. That injury that he had really sapped a lot of his speed, and while he's a good possession receiver right now, he's basically 6 yards and that's it right now. And that's what the Carolina Panthers offense looks like. Just 6 yards. Hopefully you get to short yardage situation on third down and convert. If you don't, you're punting, and that's just how the season's going to go for Carolina. They could be a team that just through the natural progression of things gets one of the top picks in the draft and then trades it to get all kinds of draft capital. You saw what the Chicago Bears did this year, bringing in DJ Moore and then getting a first-round pick and additional draft capital next year. That could be something very similar to what the Carolina Panthers do going forward, but we'll see what happens for them. You look at the NFC West. Now, this is probably one of the top teams in the entire NFL. The San Francisco 49ers, probably one of the most complete teams along with Philadelphia and Miami, but they seem to be clicking on all cylinders, both offensively and defensively. I think they still could use one more weapon on offense, which is why you're seeing them being bandied about as a fit for Devontae Adams. But I think they still got enough of offensive pieces right now to be able to get the job done. As long as Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, they should be just fine. If they have an issue at that running back spot, Elijah Mitchell's proven he can handle the load back there, but then they'd be really thin. A lot of the former San Francisco 49ers running backs are now on that Miami Dolphins team. Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, etc. They could look towards the free agent market if they have another injury back there. But right now, Christian McCaffrey, probably one of the best running backs in the entire NFL right now, probably the most consistent fantasy football running back in the NFL right now. For the Seattle Seahawks, a little bit of an up and down start for them, but they seem to be catching their stride a little bit. Geno Smith still hasn't had a great game so far this season, 2-1 on the year. I still have question marks about whether or not this team can hold on and get to a 500 record, but so far so good for them. Rams are going to be in salary cap hell for the next couple of years. The Matthew Stafford contract absolutely looks like an albatross right now. We saw some headlines this offseason that Sean McVay was at least eyeballing some analyst jobs in the booth, and you can kind of understand why. This team doesn't really have a great future. They got some great production out of Puka Nacua so far this year, out of nowhere, especially with Cooper Kupp going down due to injury, being placed on IR. But Puka looks like a nice addition for them, but I think this is more of Sean McVay's, finding a guy like Bill Belichick used to do with Wes Welker coming into the team and then Julian Edelman coming into the team. Think of Puka Nacua as that next equivalent of that type of player, at least from the outside looking in. You look at the Arizona Cardinals, they've played all 3 games tough so far this year against the NFC East. The Washington Commanders were taken to the brink by them in week 2. The Giants had a big deficit and were able to come back against them. But I think the old adage of if you're at least able to play solid football against this team, you should be able to win. Meanwhile, the Dallas Cowboys, when they went in there to Arizona, they couldn't stop the run. Their quarterback turned over the ball in the red zone, had a turnover on downs in the red zone as well, kicked a field goal, another trip into the red zone, and they just did not play sound football against that Arizona team, and that's why they took them for their lunch anyway. And we'll see if they can fix their issues. But the Cardinals are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year, but nowhere near as bad as we all thought they were going to be coming into the season. We saw them cut Colt McCoy days before the start of the season, make the trade for Joshua Dobbs, and say, hey, you're our starter. Well, he has familiarity with this coaching staff, and he looks like he has command of this offense. James Conner looks like a very effective running back. If this team had any other weapons on it right now, you're talking about one of the best running back, quarterback situations back there if they had Kyler Murray back there. Kind of think of the read option thing that they could use. James Conner's off to a nice start so far this year. But the Cardinals, don't make any mistakes. They're going to probably finish 5-11, 5-12, somewhere in there. That's about where the Cardinals are going to end up finishing, with a nice win early in the season against the Dallas Cowboys. But that's kind of where things sit around the NFL right now. Biggest headline for me, though, is what's going to happen with the LA Chargers. Are they going to dismiss their head coach? Are they going to be able to hold on to him and make a run for the division and make a hard push in the postseason? Because if they don't, I think this team's up for some big changes. Kellen Moore could be the head coach there next year if he's successful as an offensive coordinator there. Justin Herbert should have taken a step into that top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. The next issue for me, though, is out in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence having a little bit of a disappointing start. He needs to get off the schneid this week. And after a disappointing showing against both the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans, it's about time that they correct those issues. But let us know what videos you would like us to make. We're going to make some shorts here in just a few minutes that we'll be posting here over the next couple of days. Please feel free to leave us a comment, hit that like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Our MLB Live will be starting at 7 o'clock this evening. And then again tonight we will have the Texas Rangers versus the Los Angeles Angels game at 8:38. So make sure you join us for that one. Welcome in Alberto. Do you know if Dallas O-line hurt? Do they have their starting lineup? Well, that was the other issue in that Arizona game. They were missing for the majority of that game 3 offensive linemen. Their center, Tyler Biadasz. They were missing Zach Martin as well, and then Tyron Smith missed some time as well at left tackle. So to answer your question, are they going to have some of their starting lineup back on that O-line? Yes, but they will not have all of it. It sounds like Biadasz is still dealing with something, but they're getting healthier on that offensive line. They're going to have at least 4 of the 5 starters back by the sounds of it. Tyler Smith has made his return last week as well. He looked rusty. Another week of actually playing football should help his production as well. but this offensive line will get healthier as the season goes here over the next couple of weeks, so that should help their running game as well. But to answer your question, will they be completely as decimated as they were last week against Arizona? No. They'll be back and a little bit better than they were last week. So appreciate the question, Alberto. Make sure you drop a like if you haven't already. As I mentioned, we'll be live for you guys again here in about 25 minutes, discussing the MLB playoffs, how the wild card is kind of sitting right now, potential playoff positioning, how things are going to work out in the wild card round, who's going to get the bye in the American League, who's getting the bye in the National League, and ultimately predictions for the World Series. Who's going to win the American League pennant and the NL pennant, and who's going to take home the World Series trophy. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back with you guys next week for this NFL Live breakdown, all the latest from around the NFL, some of the greatest headlines that you're looking forward to. We'll try to post some videos on as well, but we'll see you guys here shortly.